Yeah.
For a
I can't
while.
watch, I'm not allowed to watch
But-
regular TV, like cartoons. Might be and I will, if it's just like me and I, we can watch. And she'll watch. She's so young, she has. Otherwise, we, yeah, so she kind of gets into. He doesn't. We're good, yeah.
My name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. I on Zoom. So my sobriety birth date is November 7th, 2011. I have been here in Missoula for about a year and a half, although I've been coming to Montana for more than 20 years. My folks live here, and we moved to the area recently. And you know, moving in sobriety is tough. At least it is for me. I've done it a few times. And it's tough because for me, it triggers one of the things that led me to drink, which is not feeling like I fit in, not feeling like I have a place. And so alcohol was an effective way for me to feel like I fit in, even though nothing really was different. I just perceived like I fit in. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited my friend invited me to do this, and I'm nervous because I want everybody to like me and I want to fit in. But I already know that I'm with friends. Some I know, some I don't. But I already know I'm welcome. So that's one of the magic things about AA and recovery. So the thing I want to talk about is, you know, of course, I want to talk a little bit about my drinking and how I got sober, because it's important. But I really want to talk about how it is that I walk through my life today, feeling like I fit in, even if I'm not sure I do. And it comes to, it's all centered around the 3rd and 11th step. So I knew when I walked in, I was in the right place. These two are on the wall. You know, the book talks about a lot of things, and there's a few places where it's absolute. And one of them is where it talks about this is a spiritual program. The way I think about it, my experience is that drinking led me to find my true self, which is, I think, what many of us find in this program if we're open to it and we do the program. Yes, I've stopped drinking, but a whole lot more has happened since I stopped drinking. And that's what I want to focus on today. So let's start from the what happened. And this is the part, you know, telling my stories is difficult because I think it's different than some people's. And you know, I don't want to be different than people, but it is my story, so I'll tell it as it happened. I grew up on the East Coast. I'm part of a large family that has historically had a lot of wealth in it. And so my role models were always in drinking situations was that formal cocktail hour where the adults would sit around in the parlor and have drinks. And it was sort of, that's what to me being grown up meant, is that at cocktail hour, people got around and wore nice clothes and drank fancy drinks. And my mother was an alcoholic. Well, there's a lot of alcoholism in my family, but it's cleverly disguised. But my mother's alcoholism progressed to the point where it broke up the marriage of my parents and put her into some difficult financial situations. And so I immediately, because I compared myself to my cousins, the other parts of my family, our lived experience was not the same as theirs. So she moved us from Maryland to Arizona when I was quite young. And she went, while her drinking progressed, she went back to graduate school. And we lived in a rent-controlled community near the university. But at the same time, when I would travel back to see my family, that the difference in that experience and seeing how different parts of my family lived at that time was very, very different. Just as a contrast, you know, living in rent control in the Phoenix area and then visiting my grandparents, where literally we were served on with butlers with silver trays. And so I just associated that that's where you're supposed to be. That's where, when everything's going well, being wealthy and having those kinds of trappings, that's the way it was supposed to be. And I wasn't having that experience. So I started to think, and then I started connecting alcohol. So by the time that I experimented with alcohol, it was really just me trying to be like the other people. And even in high school, the cool kids were the ones who were having the parties and they had the nicer houses and they were just the cool kids, and I wanted to be like them. And so I always was trying, you know, I was a nerd. Like I was a nerd, but I wasn't part of any group really as a kid. I had friends in the drama club and I liked drama. So, but I was also like one of the top athletes at the school. And I was also liked the science club. So all the clubs, all the cool kids in each of those groups liked me, but also didn't like me because I wasn't just with them. So I was always in between things. And so I didn't go to a lot of parties. It wasn't until I got to college that I really learned how to party. And I learned that, you know, I could redefine who I was and what I stood for. My roommate, my freshman year, was a guy from Vermont who was big into the Grateful Dead. And that just, it fit me like a glove. I went to school in Colorado and I drank a lot and I smoked a lot and I listened to a lot of, I walked down Shakedown Street. Let's just put it that way. I still do, but now I'm a wharf rat when I go to shows, for those that know what that is. So yeah, college was, I got really good at partying. My sophomore year, my friends and I lived in a house and we had so many parties and we drank so much because a keg of beer was like $25 at that time. That after the end of the year, the neighbors bought the house and had it torn down because they never wanted to have that happen again to them. I almost dropped out of college, but you know, my drinking just kind of kept progressing. I was always the guy who I was always the one who started a party. Like if I could get 4 or 5 people with $4 or $5, we had a keg. And it was just how I could feel comfortable. It's how I could feel like I fit in. I got through college, and then I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started bouncing around doing different things. I started a bungee jumping business. And I was cruising around the Midwest with a hot air balloon and a crane, and I had a bungee jumping company. But it was like, you know, balancing like a progressing lifestyle of alcohol and drugs while doing that. I was just feeding off being cool. I was trying to chase feeling good. And the adrenaline, frankly, of bungee jumping fed into that whole thing. It's like, and the minor celebrities, it was sort of cool to be a bungee jumping guy and to show up at a town and, you know, 20, 30,000 people would come. And I just thrived off that external energy. And then the partying all around that. My mother died right at the end of that period, and that was devastating for me. She had gotten sober, and had a very successful career in the corporate world, and so she was a real loss to me, and I didn't know what to do after that. So I went to Central America for 6 months to try and find the answer. Beer is cheap in Central America, and that's not where the answer is, but I didn't know that yet. I think during this period, I started to experiment with meditation and prayer. Even in college, I was taking courses on world religions, I didn't know what I was missing, but I knew there was something missing. And so when I was down in Central America, I did more of that, you know. I got back, got involved in another business, and I started to, again, seek approval from things outside of myself. seek success and acceptance by being successful in the world, in the eyes of my family, that the expectations that weren't put on me, but that I put on myself. Most of my family are Yale, Harvard, Princeton, big, corporate, whatever. But I assumed that they only would love me if I was at their level, and I wasn't. So chasing a business was my way of trying to see if I could fit in. And then my grandfather died, and he was also close to me. And so 2 deaths in a short amount of time brought me face to face with what's actually important to life. And so I went on a motorcycle trip up to Alaska for 6 months. And there I did find the answer, not sobriety, but I remember sitting at the base of some mountain, and I'd been meditating and writing a lot. And it came to me what I wanted to do, that I knew that I had to pursue a life for myself, and that I wanted to be a creative person, and I wasn't going to worry about what other people said. And I had a strong, a spiritual awakening of a sorts at that point, but I wasn't sober yet. So when I got back and I started pursuing my life in those ways, certain things started to feel better, but I couldn't get any traction. It was like hitting the gas in a car on the ice. So I was getting there, but not getting there really. I decided to go back to school because I wanted to be a writer, and I chose the field of advertising. So if anybody's seen that show Mad Men with the Don Draper figure, that's the career path I chose. So I went to Miami, did some graduate school there, ended up working in a big agency in Chicago. And so for the last 25 years, that's my field. I do. Today when we're watching the Super Bowl, I'll be watching the game, but my Super Bowl are the commercials. That's my industry. That's what I'm interested in. And so that world is filled with drinking. And so while I was pursuing one part of it, of what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be, I was getting more and more lost in alcohol and trying to fit in and trying to be cool. And in that industry, winning awards, kind of like, in the music industry with Emmys, or the film industry with Oscars. There are lots of awards in the advertising industry, and we run around the world trying to beat each other creatively. And that's what I was chasing. And I was living that rock star life for a while. I was traveling around the world. We were able to move my family to Switzerland. And I was, going to Hollywood and working with top directors and hiring musicians and getting closer and closer to death all the same time, because my drinking just got worse and worse, as it does with alcoholics. I was hiding it really well, I thought. But I was slowly dying, and I was getting further and further away from who I really could be. I knew I was an alcoholic long before, because it's in my family. Even about 3 years before I got sober, I remember my sister, who's also in the program at that time, she was deep in her cups, and she was visiting my parents and wrapped my father's car around a tree and ended up in the hospital, broke her leg and so forth. And as a family, we decided to do an intervention. And so after talking, there's a guy that we brought in to help us, and he suggested that we all get together for 3 days and really learn about the disease of alcoholism, because it's in our family. And the strategy was, at the end of these 3 days, we'd all have better understanding of alcoholism, how it works, what it means, and how to get sober. And then we would, if she was up for it, put her on a plane and send her off to treatment. So to get that weekend to happen, and I was living in Switzerland at this time, they asked me to be the one that would reach out to her. Now, I was drinking a lot at that time. And so I was playing that wonderful thing that we do in alcohol as active alcoholics, where the problem isn't me, the problem's you. So Tim, and I was drinking a lot, and I was the one who saved her from her alcoholism. I remember, we went and spent 3 days together, and it was great. I learned a lot about alcoholism. At the end, he goes around everybody in the family and suggests, what you might want to do. And when he got to me, he said, you should probably do 30 days in AA and 30 days in Al-Anon and figure out which program's for you. And he told my sister, you probably should get some help, and we have a bed for you at the Betty Ford Clinic if you're willing to go. And she was. And then I got to go home and each night during this whole 3 days, of course, I was getting hammered, and then coming hungover to save my sister. I get up back on the plane, and I went back to the same thing I was doing, trying to find who I was through a bottle and through external recognition. Meanwhile, I was burning through all the inheritance I'd gotten from my mother and my grandfather. And by the time I got to the end, I'd gone through $700,000-800,000, and then I was in deep, deep debt. And I was making a couple $100,000 a year. And my father came out to visit me. And I said, Dad, I don't know what's going on. I'm making all this money. But I'm living check to check, and I can barely keep it together. He said, you think it might have something to do with your drinking? And that I had been leading up to that day. I'd been thinking I either have to kill myself because I can't because I'm a father and I don't want to fail. And I'd seen my sister get sober, and I watched her change her life and change the life of her children. And she'd call me and say, "Oh, Tim, we're having game night and all my friends are coming over at 7 p.m. and we're going to play Parcheesi." And I thought, that fucking sucks. And then also, but I want to go. That's what I want to do. And I watched her life change and my life. And I was just in that place, that jumping off point where we talk about. And thank God the big book talks about, a bottom is not defined by where you are. It's defined by the end of the road for you, whatever that is. And it was definitely the end of the road for me. I was done. And so when my dad said that, I said, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for help. And he said, so what do you want to do about it? I go, I have no idea. Maybe I could do AA. My sister did that. My mother did that. He says, why don't you call Bill, who was the guy that helped our family with my sister. And remember, this is like 3-4 years after the intervention. And I call him up and he goes, I was wondering when you'd call me. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I go, I don't know. I think I should go to some AA meetings. He goes, well, there's another idea. He said, if you got diagnosed with cancer or some fatal disease and you had the means to get into a hospital and get the best treatment you could, would you not do that? I said, of course I would. He said, well, Tim, alcoholism is a fatal disease. People die all the time from it. And you're blessed enough to be able to get some help from an inpatient treatment. So that's what I recommend. And I said, well, yeah, let's do that. So we started to explore different options, and I found a program in Utah, because in Europe there aren't really, I talked to my doctor there and she was like, well, even as it says, as we read more about alcoholism today, it talks about, we can send you to a sanitarium or a health club basically. And that's where they wanted to send me, up into the Alps to one of those fancy resorts to take it easy for a while. And, there aren't really treatment centers in Europe. Maybe there are now, but at that time, there really wasn't. So I went to a treatment center in Utah, and that was the day I walked in, was on this November 7th, 2011. I haven't had a drink or anything since. So that's how I got here. I'm really glad that the treatment center focused on a couple things in equal measures. Number one was the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, 12 steps. And, you know, I had a temporary sponsor from the first week I was there, working on the steps. Then the other thing was like having something to get sober to. And, you know, we talk a lot about in this program, you know, this is a framework for living. We're not a glum lot. The point of, at least for me and my experiences, and the reason why I'm believe that I'm still sober today is that my objective in being sober is not just to be sober and not drink. My objective is to live my life and be of maximum service and to express at the fullest potential of me, whatever that is. And I don't get to decide what that is, but I do believe that we're all born perfect and there is light inside everybody. And when we are trapped by our addictions, whatever they are, we are smothering that light. And the whole purpose of this program is to become a channel of thy peace, to let that light out and to bring it to other people. And that, the focus on that, on trying to figure out I had a sponsor early in the program who said, Tim, this is a program of subtraction. And it took me at least a decade to understand what the hell he meant. And I've studied a lot of like Eastern religions, and I understand like the idea of meditating to the point where you disappear into the one and all that. And I get that intellectually, but I didn't understand what he meant by it's a program of subtraction. And this idea of being service isn't just being of service to this program. I think about the concentric circles that when we get sober, we can help the fellows in this program and help the program itself. And then to practice all these principles in all our affairs means I need to expand that. And I need to be of service to other people in other ways, to my family, to my friends, to my work colleagues, and so on. And that is the purpose I have found for me for life. And AA has to be in the center, but that is not the entirety of my purpose. And so my first sponsor there at treatment taught me, he said, I guarantee you. I was like, guarantee? He said, and I'm a writer, so I like words. So let's talk about that word. But he said, I guarantee you will be sober if you do the following things every single day. When you wake up, before you do anything, you get quiet, you meditate, you pray, you read 2 pages of our literature and 2 pages of spiritual literature that's meaningful to you. And at the end of the day, you find some way that's meaningful to you to express your gratitude. And that's the core. And when you do that, your actions will be directed. And so I try and do that every day. I don't do all those things every day, but I do. The way I think about it is like riding a bike. I have to keep pedaling. I have to keep doing these actions. I have to do that every morning. And I can get away with coasting for a while. I can get away with not pedaling, and, it's okay. It's kind of nice to coast. But pretty soon, the bike gets a little wobbly, a little unstable. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to fall down. And so, I had that foundation when I was in treatment, paired with a spiritual experience. And I'm going to read just a brief excerpt from Bill's story because, it says sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, and mine was quickly. And I'm just going to read this because this is, the words were well written. So, I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to making my beginning. I'm going to jump forward. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. then only might I expect to receive. But that would be in great measure. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. And that happened to me. I was, this treatment center was up in the cirque of Sundance Canyon. And there's a room at the top of this place that looks out over the mountains. And every morning we would go up there and meditate. And very quickly, after about 3 days, I was meditating and I could just feel that wind blow through. It was like the energy I had been pulling in from the world, trying to control and make it be and make me feel by pulling in. And that was the first time that the energy came through and out. And now every day when I start my day, that's what I focus on is to really say, whatever I'm to do today, let me be of maximum service, whatever that is. And I apply that to my AA life, to my family life, and my work life. And then as a result of that, whatever happens, I'm not going to pretend that I don't have outcomes that I want, but I'm more resilient with what does happen. I'm able to just accept. It talks about, I don't remember, I'm not a page number remembering guy, but like there's that famous one about acceptance is the key to all my problems. And that passage, I think resonates for so many people, including myself, because if I'm petting the cat the right direction, in other words, that's my metaphor for if I'm bringing the light in and thinking, how can I help others? Then whatever happens is exactly the way it's supposed to be. So I got, by the time I got into treatment, I didn't know if I was really an alcoholic or not. I mean, I knew, but I didn't really know. And I kept comparing my story to my classmates' stories. My roommate, they found under a bridge, he was trying to shoot bath salts. I moved from Zurich, Switzerland, where I had 2 cars and was flying all over the world and making a shitload of money. And so if I looked at the external and I said, am I an alcoholic? Well, my story's not like that. When I read the stories here and I listen to the stuff that people on hospital beds and almost dying, if I use that as the gauge of whether I'm an alcoholic, I will fucking die. I have to look inside and say, I was done because it was time for me to be the best person I can be. It was time for me to be of service to you and not to me. And yes, when with the clarity of being sober, I look back and I go, well, shit, I was drinking a lot. I was in debt, having, and I was making terrible decisions. I was not a good father. I was not a good spouse to my wife. And so now I can see that I caused real damage, and I worked through that through the steps and 8 and 9. And, I've had a sponsor, my last sponsor, when I moved here from Seattle, he really focused on the 6th and 7th step. Like that's basically all we did. And, I move here and I get a new sponsor, and many of you know Michael, and my playbook with the sponsors, I just do the steps. And he's like, nah, you've been around enough. What you need to do is you need to help other people in this program more. And so we do step work, but he's like, you're ready for more and more of the 12th step and to be of maximum service. And so that's what I'm working on now. And I'm expanding my 12-step work in different ways. I'm trying to be more of service to the local community and get to know people so that you'll like me. And then I'm also at my work. I work for a large corporation. We have 110,000 employees around the world. And I've recently made the decision to break my anonymity, and we're starting there's a lot of companies that have these. They're basically employee resource groups for people in recovery. And so, you know, not to promote me, but to be there, as it talks about in our book, being of service and being available, because there's a lot of people who don't, like me, who had a similar experience where things are going good, that their bottom is at a different place, but they're just as alcoholic and they're just as likely to die. And so making the off-ramp to AA easier, or other addictions easier, even if your bottom is at a different place, and because of the kind of job or the kind of world you live in. So that's how I'm trying to be of service at my job. I also, as I talked about those concentric circles, I'm trying to be active in AA, but then I'm also mentoring a lot of people in their professional lives. And that can vary from all kinds of things, from being of service to them and their growth as young people. My son is 24. He's got a big group of friends, and I kind of try and coach them on different parts of their life, including those that I think might be one of us. I coach other people in their professional lives, but they always end up becoming personal relationships and being of service. And then I think about the work that I do for my employer, which is I'm trying to practice the 12th step as well. Just be of service. It's not about me. It's about what the company needs, and not worry about how that impacts me. And when I do that, weirdly, things go well. I know there's still more time. I will end on this. In my the place that the thing that I've learned, number one, is that this program is a spiritual program. I have, through my journeys of AA, become friends with people who have had all kinds of experiences. I have a friend in the program who is literally part of the royal family in Europe. I remember when we were in early sobriety, and she said, "I'm freaking out because I'm down to $20 million. And her sobriety is now, she has given up that life and become a therapist, and has a practice in Geneva, helping people get sober. I have another friend who's also part of the royal family in Germany, and he's got a castle, and he spends his whole life traveling around Europe helping people in the program to get sober. And he has his other things, but that's the nucleus of his life. I've got another friend who spent 15 years living on the street under a bridge, and he walks around the streets of Seattle with little gift bags, warm socks, feminine hygiene products, and just talks to people on the street to give them, hey, there is a way out. He came from 15 years on the street, and now he spends his entire life doing that. And what all of them have in common. Oh, another guy, he ran a treatment center where he was making a lot of money helping a lot of people, but he ended up starting one for free in Vancouver, Canada, helping homeless people, and giving them the same level of care that, he had A-list celebrities and CEOs of companies coming to him, and they were paying $300,000 a week. Now he provides the same free care for people on the street. And all those people and all those stories have the same thing in common. It is not what happened to you or how much. It is a soul sickness at the end of the day. And the way we get sober is to focus on the health of our soul and what we're supposed to be, which is of service to each other. And when we do that, that's where the real rewards come. The rest of it does not matter. And it does not make you happy. It's been my experience that when I focus on being of service, everything else takes care of itself. And so one day at a time, I intend to keep doing just that. Thanks for letting me share.